Welcome to our Curious Amalgam, the weekly podcast brought to you by the Antitrust Law section of the American Bar Association. Our Curious Amalgam explores the fascinating and increasingly overlapping world of competition, consumer protection, data protection, and privacy law. Each week, we bring you leading global experts on the most compelling issues of the day. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to our Curious Amalgam. My name is Alicia Downey, and the title of today's episode is Public Perception of the Judiciary Changing? A conversation with Judge Bernice Donald. The American judicial system is part of the checks and balances that define political governance under the U.S. Constitution. We think of the judiciary as an impartial and independent branch with responsibility for interpreting our laws and deciding cases and controversies. Pretty bedrock, right? Even with these foundational principles, the public perception of the role of the judiciary may be changing. How do we ensure that the public trust in the institution continues? To help answer that question, we're joined today by Appellate Judge Bernice Donald, who, among many other achievements, was recently awarded the National Judicial College's Sandra Day O'Connor Award for Outstanding Contributions to Justice. My co-host today is Kayla Odom. Hi, Kayla.
Hi, Alicia.
Kayla, would you like to introduce our guest to our listeners?
It would be my pleasure. Judge Donald is a woman of many firsts. She was the first African-American woman to serve as a judge in the history of the state of Tennessee, elected to the General Sessions Criminal Court in 1982. Thereafter, she was the first African-American woman to serve as a U.S. bankruptcy judge, serving in the Western District of Tennessee. In 1995, she was appointed to the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Tennessee, again the first African-American woman to serve on that court. Judge Donald was appointed by President Obama to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, where she has been serving since 2011. Judge Donald has been an active leader in many community organizations and bar associations, including the American Bar Association, and she is a longtime friend of the Antitrust Law section. You may have seen her speaking at an event or a conference, as Judge Donald is an internationally recognized legal scholar who has served as faculty for programs across the world. Judge Donald has received over 100 awards for her professional, civic, and community activities, including the Sandra Day O'Connor Award. Judge Donald, we are so happy and honored to have you with us today on our Curious Amalgam. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kayla, and thank you, Alicia. It is my pleasure to be here with you.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about your background before we get to today's main topic. You are a trailblazer, and we can all learn something from your journey to where you are today. What was it like to be the first African-American woman judge to serve on various courts?
Kayla, it was exhilarating, daunting, and at times frightening. You know, we think about people who are first, but we often don't think about the additional burdens and scrutiny that comes along with those positions. It is like holding a trust position. You know that others will be judged by your successes and failures, and how you perform may very well either aid others in attaining those positions, or it may hinder their progress. So in each of those positions, I considered it a great honor, but I also considered it a great responsibility to make certain that I comported myself in a way that not only brought honor to the position, but that also ensured that someone else who was in a similar position might one day have the opportunity to achieve. Given that I have been on 4 courts now, I trust that I have served in those positions well and achieved the goal of giving fidelity to those respective positions.
Well, I think that's certainly the case. The Sandra Day O'Connor Award from the National Judicial College, it recognizes a judge or a former judge who's demonstrated extraordinary service and commitment to justice as embodied in the National Judicial College's core values, which are to demonstrate an absolute commitment to justice, deliver and inspire excellence and innovation in one's work, champion integrity, and practice engaged leadership. Now, Justice O'Connor was the first woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court, who, like yourself, is an inspiration for all of us. What does receiving this award mean to you?
I am honored beyond expression to be receiving this award for a woman who was the first in our country to occupy the hallowed chambers of the Supreme Court, who served during difficult times, who opined on some of the most important issues of our day, and comported herself in a way that brought honor, respect, and in some instances, unity to the court. The thing that the award does not talk about is Justice O'Connor's humility. And I want to stop right here and share with you a story that I should be embarrassed to tell, but here goes. When Justice O'Connor was first appointed to the court, I was a young judge on a limited jurisdiction court. I was as excited as anyone by her ascension to the court. Didn't know her, didn't really know about her until she started going through the nomination process. Yet I felt a kinship to her because we were judges, we were women, and she was doing something that I don't know that I ever thought would happen in my lifetime. There came an occasion when I traveled to DC with my husband. He went on business and I just went along. And so just being in the city of Washington, D.C., knowing that she was there, I thought I would really love to meet and talk to her. And without a lot of thought about how ludicrous my actions were, I picked up the telephone and called the Supreme Court and asked to speak to her. I did not speak to her. I got someone apparently who got someone in her chambers. And I told them that I was a new judge, a new woman judge in Tennessee, that I was in town and that I would like to come by and meet her. And they said, "You would what?" And I repeated it again with a straight face because I didn't at that time see anything odd about what I was doing. And they told me to give them my number and they would call me back. And in about 30 minutes, I got a call back saying that Justice O'Connor would see me. Now, my reasoning was she's a new woman judge, justice rather, I'm a new woman judge. We'll just go over and chat. She invited me into her chambers. She served tea. We sat and visited. She asked me about my judicial position. I was a general sessions limited jurisdiction judge. My maximum judicial authority was 11 months and 29 days of jail time and a $1,000 fine. That was it. And here's this woman who is a justice on the Supreme Court of the United States who is sitting there talking to me and just honoring me with her, rather by allowing me to be in her presence. And then she didn't stop there. She invited me to sit in her box that afternoon for oral arguments. And I did. And I thought, what a wonderful experience. I still did not think about the enormity of that occasion until much later on when I thought, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. But she was so gracious. She received people. She was a justice on the highest court, but she had an affinity for making herself personable and connecting with people and helping people realize that the law is there for all of us, that the justices are the caretakers of the law, but the law is for all of our benefit. And she had the manner, the dignity, and the presence to receive people who most people probably would have said, "You have no right to be here." She gave place to the common people, and I shall always treasure her for that moment, for not just turning me away by saying, I don't think that I need to spend my time with you. It was just, it's a memory that I will carry with me for the rest of my life.
That's
Oh, that's a
incredible.
great, yeah, it's a beautiful story. Got a very strong personal connection to
Yes.
this award for which she's named. And I just want to let everybody know, if you don't already know, Sandra Day O'Connor's work in civics education, which she focused on strongly after she retired, could not have come a minute too soon. And it's something that should be focused on even more heavily, I think, these days. So I give credit to her for that as well.
I agree. She really made herself accessible in a meaningful way through her work because she understood and knew that we really need to have that personal connection with the law, not just lawyers and people who are associated with the justice system, but people, children, students, young, old, all of us need to have that personal connection with the law because it touches all of our lives
Mm-hmm.
at every space and at each time and point.
Judge Donald, what made you want to become a judge?
Kayla, I grew up in Olive Branch, Mississippi, and I grew up during a very different and difficult time. I grew up during a period of segregation. I was, at the time the first Brown case was filed in the Brown versus the Board of Education series, I was unborn. And when that case was decided, I was 3 years old. When the remedies phase was decided, I was 4. And yet, when I began school in 1957, all of the vestiges of racial discrimination and class discrimination were still there. I didn't have the knowledge to understand the institutional and systemic factors that gave rise to my condition, but I could look around and see that life for me was different and difficult.
Mm-hmm.
As I grew and learned about uh, the law and about societal issues, I started to feel and appreciate the disparate communities in which I grew up as compared to my white counterparts. And I've always felt that when I am reading about law and about issues, if I can't find my place in there or my connection to that event, it raises questions. And it raised questions about my existence and my future. I decided to become a lawyer when I saw real injustice visited upon a young person in a courthouse. That's the moment that I became outraged, and I decided that I wanted to become a lawyer so that I could represent children. Because if people, as young children, aren't the beneficiaries of justice and equality, then I think that that impairs their ability to become full citizens, to achieve their full measure. And I wanted young children to be able to receive that full measure. So that's what got me into law school. In the interest of full disclosure, I have never yet represented a child, but that's what got me there. And what got me to become a judge was a similar situation. A young woman in court who was accused of shoplifting. I was at that time a public defender, and this was not my client, but I was in court. And I think when it comes to justice issues, I can't afford to just be a bystander. This young woman was accused of shoplifting, and the judge was conducting an indigency hearing, but she was asking questions that were just chock full of stereotypes. She asked the young woman her source of income, and the young woman stated that she was receiving either AFDC or welfare or something to that effect. The judge then asked her whether she was having more children to get a larger welfare check. And then the judge asked, do any of these children have the same father? And she capped it off by asking the defendant, And who is the father of this child? Because the young woman was pregnant at that time. And I, in my own mind, I thought every individual who appears in a courtroom deserves to be treated with dignity. We should not have to surrender our dignity in order to get justice. It's not required. And I decided that I wanted to make sure that I could remedy that situation. And I decided to run for judge. So my first judgeship was an elected one.
Mm-hmm.
But it was that outrage at that measure of injustice that caused me to become a judge. Now, I started as a general sessions criminal court judge, but I didn't stay there because I also believed that there was a risk to staying too long.
Interesting. And you've had a chance to impact several different courts, as I mentioned at the beginning. So you've seen what the different courts are like, federal and state.
Yes.
Do you think that the public understands the role? And now this is getting to our topic for today. Do you think that the public understands the role of the court as opposed to a lawmaker? Is that sort of something that's understood by the average person in society?
It is my firm belief that the public does not understand fully. When we talk about the justice system, people automatically think of judges. There are many people who don't understand the role of the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. People talk about the judge's role with respect to things like mandatory minimums. Judges don't make those laws. The legislature, Congress, and state legislatures do that. They don't understand the role of the executive in the corrections and phase and the prisons and all of that. It's just all wound up together. And I think part of this is that when we talk about the system, we don't compartmentalize. We talk about it as a unified system, and we don't attend to the roles of each of the players in that system. Also, we have a lot of popular literature and a lot of Hollywood gloss on the justice system. Many people get their information not from reading or from observation, but from the stylized treatment of the system in literature and in popular television and movies. And so there is a lack of understanding. I also believe that today we're in a highly visual world. Many of the court processes are not televised because who can afford to, I guess, televise all of that? Maybe we could do more. And I know there's a raging debate over whether or not we should have cameras in the courtroom and whether we shouldn't. Some states have them, others don't. But many people look for their information through the media and through the videotaped processes, and they don't get that. We are not giving the attention that Justice O'Connor would have had us give to civics and understanding those roles. So people can go through probably an entire elementary and high school career without really focusing on civics. And so we as a society are not giving the kind of attention that allows people really to develop early on the analytical skills and the baseline knowledge to understand the various complicated components of court, let alone understanding the difference between the trial court and the appellate court. I have to tell you that many times when I'm going through the airport, people say to me, "Oh, you're no longer a judge," because they don't see my name in the newspaper as it used to be with the trial court. And you try to explain that you're on appellate court, and they view that as you being retired, so you're no longer a judge. And then there are those who say, "You must not be a judge any longer. I don't see you on TV." Well, I've never been on TV, but they view the television characters as judges and not the people who are doing the day in, day out work, unless they see it connected with some high profile event.
Sure. And, well, with not understanding the role and the differences between trial courts and appellate courts, not understanding, the limitations created by the standard of review. And like you said, people often turn to the media to shape their understanding of what's going on in the judiciary. And, the media is in part to blame for a lot of the criticism that we commonly hear. I wonder if there's a way to get more of the good stories out there about, what the courts are doing and how they're actually doing things right. I mean, you only hear about, when people have criticism
Sure.
about things that they think go wrong. And you mentioned these pivotal moments whenever there seems to be a major decision or a big change in the way something's been interpreted. I know we've recently gone through that with Roe versus Wade. Can you think of any other examples where there was a major Supreme Court decision that had a major impact on the public's perception of the court?
I want to go back to the initial part of your question about the media and its role. And far be it from me to bash media, but you're right, they do have a role to play in this. Unfortunately, we're in a very complicated time in our society where media and others are stressed. There are many things out there where people are getting information that are masking as media, which is not embracing the true role that we understand to be the media's role in educating the public. And there are so much of what pretends to be media comes to us as editorial and opinion based. So we're not getting that straight down the middle Walter Cronkite type of treatment of issues. There are organizations out there that are doing that, but we know that resources are stretched. Here in Memphis, a small media market, we used to have a reporter in the courthouse, and that reporter developed relationships with all of the actors in the system. And so that person built trust, and people would talk and give information. Oftentimes, when somebody is parachuting in for a story, they don't have the background really to give that the treatment and to explain the nuance that might be required. And so you don't get that full treatment. We know that media budgets are shrinking, and so there's that issue. With respect to other things that we could do to really enhance this, and for stories that have occurred where they have gotten the kind of treatment that you mentioned, the Roe v. Wade and I guess Dobbs and others have gotten. There are a lot of big cases that don't necessarily command that kind of interest because they lack sizzle.
Right.
But they're really important. And so I don't want to talk about any of the current cases, but I want to go back and hearken to a case that I began with. Brown, years ago, very difficult time. The Chief Justice of the court at that time understood the importance of that case, understood that there could be huge dissension and division, and felt like the court needed to speak with one voice because of the monumental nature of that case. I think as courts, sometimes we are guilty of not really giving attention to the fact that the cases will have tremendous impact and how we roll them out. When we write opinions, whether it's at the trial court or the appellate court, we're writing for multiple audiences. We're writing for the parties to that case. We're writing for the public. We're writing for future courts and maybe the court even that we're supervising if we're on the appellate court. And we're writing for a general public because part of that role is to educate beyond just the narrow issue in that case, but to help situate that ruling within the larger society. And I believe that we have to give attention to all of those audiences for whom we write. That helps us because it also helps if the reporting entities can understand the case. Many of these reporters who are writing don't necessarily have a law background. And so perhaps they're doing the best they can. They're on limited time and budget. So we have got to do our role to help. Some courts have information officers who can give additional information, but others don't. So it's difficult. And I'm not giving you a solution. I'm simply, I suppose, opining on the problem.
Well, and you explained why opinions can be so long sometimes as you're speaking to so many different
Yes.
audiences, and that does make sense as to why.
Sure.
Does it seem that people are paying more attention to courts these days? Like, in general, are people more interested in government, including the courts? Has that been a
I think
shift?
there is, sure, I'm sorry for stepping on you, but there's tremendous interest, I believe, in the courts and the work products. Uh, but that interest uh, is not singular. It's not just the work product. People are interested in who's on the court. They're interested in who's placing judges on the court. If there is an election, they're interested in which groups are mobilizing and supporting access to the courts. They're interested in the demographic of the courts, whether they're local, state, or federal. And I believe that interest is warranted. You know, when I first came on the court back in 1982, as you mentioned, Kayla, there had never been an African American woman on the court. And people could not, in in their own minds and their own experiences, um, envision an African American woman on the court because there had never been one. People were accustomed to seeing men, and particularly white men. There'd only been in my county two white women on the court in recent times. And so it was an anomaly to see this person. And there were natural apprehensions about whether or not this would be successful, whether or not this person would be able to do the job. And I think some of those perceptions continue. But I do think as our judiciary becomes more diverse not just in race, but ethnicity, in age, in gender, in backgrounds. I think people looking at the courts and being able to see themselves or being able to see some of their experiences in the work of the court, I think it gives people greater confidence.
Mm-hmm.
People are able to look at people and say, oh, I know this person. And I think back when I first became a judge, and I'm sorry for spending so much time on this, but when I first became a judge, the clerk of the court staffed my courtroom. And I had on September 1 a ceremony in the beginning of the morning, and then I had a court docket in the afternoon. The clerk of court wanted me to be comfortable. He was totally invested in my success. He wanted to make sure that I had everything I needed to do that job. The only problem was he didn't talk to me about this. He was a middle-aged white male, but a wonderful man who was very caring and really genuine in his desire to make certain that I had the tools I needed to do this job. And so when I opened court on that afternoon of September 1 of 82, this was the demography of my courtroom. There I was, a new judge in my black robe in an elevated position. Sitting just below me were my 2-minute clerks. Alicia, there was an African American male to my left, an African American female to my right. The prosecutor, because this was a criminal docket, was an African American male. He was at a 45-degree angle standing on the floor. And then in the courtroom, there was the security team. There were 4 Shelby County Sheriff's deputies in uniform, each armed with a Smith & Wesson weapon strapped to their side. And they were ready to do their jobs, and I was ready to dispense justice. The first person to come into that courtroom that afternoon was a young white male. He walked in, he looked around the courtroom. His eyes grew quite wide as he saw no one in there who looked like him. He came to the courtroom with fear and trepidation and requested a continuance, and I granted that. 30 days later, he came back for his court date with an African American defense attorney. Now, that may have been the attorney he wanted to hire anyway. I don't know, but I suspect that it had something to do with the fact that he was concerned about his ability as a white male to get justice in a place where everyone else was African American. I went to Mr. Goldsby, the clerk, and thanked him for his care about me, but I said we had to care about the larger issue, and that is people's perception of justice. So I told him we needed to change out some of the court personnel, and we changed out 2 of the African American male deputies and brought in 2 white males. And even though those 2 deputies had nothing to do with the adjudicative function, their presence seemed to change uh, the culture and the attitude in the courtroom. It seemed to have present a more welcoming environment for people, regardless of their age, regardless of their race and religion. And I believe that illustrates to me people's concern about being able to see themselves or being able to see diversity in the place where justice is expected. Diversity has to me a correlation to the perception of justice. I can't say that it has a bearing or correlation to the actuality, but we know that the perception of justice is as important as the reality of justice. And I will stop there.
That's a great illustration of, why diversity in the courts and in the judicial system is so important for public trust. And it does have to do with whether people feel like they're going to be represented or understood, and that they're going to have a fair chance and a fair administration of
Yeah.
justice if they feel more
Yes.
confidence in the people that are serving justice. And I think this concept extends beyond the judicial system into our workplaces and our schools. So that's certainly something that people are talking about now. I'm sure they always have been, but it seems like, especially now, when we're in an extremely political environment, these things are coming to the forefront. I want to bring up an article that you and Judge Don Willett co-authored, an opinion piece in the Washington Post, and you gave some suggestions to Americans on how to build a more perfect union, especially in times when the union is not so perfect or seems not so perfect. And one of the comments in the article that I thought relevant to our discussion today is that Americans often view things through a political prism. And like you said, that's true even when they're looking at the courts. People are worried that courts might just be another vehicle for politics to play out. So my question to you is, how can people trust that judges, regardless of their personal beliefs, really are the independent branch?
Each judge, no matter which court, takes an oath and must pledge a fidelity to the law. I believe that most judges try to live up to uh, the the oath that they take. You can go on a court and do justice from your own perspective. Each of us read the black letter law and we apply that law. But that is not a cold calculation, because all of us, judges and others, we are the product of our lived and learned experiences. And none of us has a clear lens. And so we are filtering things through those lenses, but we have that justice as our baseline. And we're trying to interpret the facts and apply the law in a way that does justice. We're not trying to apply that from a political lens. I believe that because we are in such a heightened political atmosphere, people project their views onto the judges and onto the work. There are going to be differences. There always have been. Were there not, we would not even need appellate courts, because all of us would be seeing things the same and coming to unanimity on that. But today, people believe that political brands mean something, that we can predict actions based on political branding. And so if we believe that we can predict outcomes and actions based on political branding, then people believe that if Judge Q appointed, Judge Jones, then I can predict that Judge Jones is going to do a certain thing even before Judge Jones even hears the case, or if and vice versa for any other party. And it is that kind of highly partisan thinking that causes us to distrust an outcome if we believe that the outcome should have been different. I don't believe that judges operate in that hyper politicized environment. And I believe that it is easy to take an outcome and sort of divorce it from the rationale that got us there, and see it as only political based. The law is difficult. Sometimes it appears that judges are tortured in coming to certain positions, and I think part of this is because it is not a simple act or action. And I think the higher up you go, the more complicated the decisions are. And I believe that judges act from principal positions and try to do the best job they can. But I believe oftentimes the public views that through that highly and hyper partisan, hyper political lenses. And I believe this is one of the areas where, and I don't mean to unduly or unfairly criticize, but when when the media writes about cases, when we talk about this was a decision from a Trump appointed judge or a Clinton appointed judge or Obama appointed judge, on and on and on, I believe that gives that an unnecessary partisan tinge that we don't need. So those kinds of actions, I believe, help in the partisan atmosphere that attends to judges' work and judges' decisions. It's unfortunate, but I think that's where we are now. And the more we have the fights over the political appointments, I believe the more that we're going to see that intensify. I was very fortunate in that, in both times I was appointed to an Article III court. I was appointed by a Democratic president, but I was confirmed by a Republican-controlled Senate. And I have to say that I had a positive experience. The first time, Orrin Hatch was the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he was a consummate gentleman, and the process did not leave me bruised and battered. The second time, Chuck Grassley was the head of the Senate, and while I've not gone back and looked at the transcript, I understand that he had some very favorable things to say about me. So when people are talking about a decision that I might have made and talking about me as a Trump appointed judge, they don't say a Trump appointed judge and a Grassley Judicial Committee and a whoever they think of the Senate. And so it sends an incomplete picture and allows us to compartmentalize things and focus on one aspect that meets our need for partisanship.
Do you think there's anything that the judiciary can do to help with this perception that people offer, this prism that people, or this lens that people are placing as they look at the courts? Is there anything that the judiciary or other judges can do to reassure the public of their independence?
The thing that I think we can do as the third branch that has neither the power of the purse nor armies to enforce our judgments are, I think we can be more visible than we have been in the public. No, we don't need to get out and campaign, but I think there are times when we can participate in citizen activities and explain our roles and just talk to people about that. I believe that we can continue to write, not just in academic journals, but I think there are things that we should write on. I hope that, and I haven't heard anyone criticize either Judge Willett or me for the Post article, but I try to stay in the community, and I know a lot of other courts have these courts and communities committees. That is becoming increasingly more prevalent. And I believe those kinds of things can help. And to the extent that people can have a day off work and go down and sit in the courthouse and just see what it feels like there, I believe those things can help. When I was on a much lower court, I used to do these mock trials for not law students, but for elementary students. The American Bar Association has some great mock trials. It's Goldilocks and the Three Bears and Pinocchio. And so I have brought elementary students in and given them these roles, and they can read the roles, but they sit in an actual courtroom, and their parents have come with them. Other children sat in the jury box, and on one occasion, I had more children than I had roles for them, so I let the others be reporters. And they were reporting on the trial of the century, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And so the parents loved it, the children loved it, but it got them to see something about the law in a way that was non-threatening and hopefully piqued their interest in that. One of those children has since gone on to law school and is working for a major corporation in their legal department. I don't know that that was the only thing that had to do with it, but we introduced her as a young child to the law. But I think we as judges can make the law more human, and we can talk about the humane aspects of the law as well as those parts that sometimes are harsh and punitive as sometimes they need be.
That's great. And, I always love hearing from our justices and judges personally. I think it really makes an impact, at least on me as a lawyer. But I certainly look forward to hearing more and seeing if that will help give the public some more confidence in what the role and what the judiciary is doing. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep,
Thank
Judge
you.
Donald, keep up the good work. We're almost at the end of our program, but before we let you go, we're going to ask you a question we ask all of our guests. You're probably one of the most accomplished guests we've had on the show, and with all of your professional achievements and awards, what we're curious about is what's something interesting about yourself that's outside your professional life?
Well, the one thing that I could tell you about me that you probably wouldn't know about is that I had an occasion to play the role of Tina Turner at a Junebug Society event down in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And I sang Proud Mary.
Wow.
Did you wear the fringe miniskirt and everything?
I did not. I didn't quite. I didn't feel like I had the physique to do that, but I did sing Proud Mary. It was wonderful.
Oh, that's great. I love Tina Turner.
Yes.
All right, that is something interesting. Very good. You scored 100 points for that. The next little game we play is called The Curious Hat.
And now it's time for the Curious Hat.
This game is super simple. Kayla is going to pull a random question out of our virtual hat and read the question. Take it away, Kayla.
All right. My random question. What book are you reading right now?
I'm reading a book called Conversations, and it's by Dr. Robert Livingston on implicit bias and making the system and society better.
Excellent. Wow.
And have you finished it yet, or you're still in the middle?
No, I just got it last week, and I've started, but I haven't finished it. But he's also on YouTube. He's a marvelous social scientist, so it's a good read.
Okay, well, listeners, if you're looking for a recommendation, check it out. Thank you, Judge Donald. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you to everybody listening, and tune in next week to our Curious Amalgam.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of our Curious Amalgam, a competition, consumer protection, data protection, and privacy law podcast. It is produced and shared around the globe by ABA's Antitrust Law Section. The opinions expressed by the participants in this podcast are their own and do not necessarily represent their employer or other organizations. If you like what you heard or would like to become a member of the American Bar Association, please check out what the Antitrust section has to offer at ambar.org/antitrust. You can learn more about our podcast at ourcuriousamalgam.com. If you have comments, suggestions, or podcast ideas, please reach out to us at podcast@ourcuriousamalgam.com. Until next time, thank you for listening.